ExamPrep.School. Massachusetts Producers Exam for Property Insurance, exam code SERIES 16-53. There are 4 practice exams in this series. This video covers Practice Exam 1. The first 20 questions are free. In this video, we will be covering the following major categories for Practice Exam 1. Auto insurance, business owner's policy, property, commercial package policy, dwelling policy, general insurance, homeowner's policy, Section 1, insurance regulation, other coverages and options, property insurance basics. Let's walk through the format. I'll read each question and its choices. Let's get started. Question 1. Under Massachusetts law, a resident producer applicant who has successfully passed the licensing examination must submit the completed application form and required fees to the commissioner within how many days of passing the examination? A. Within 30 days of passing the examination. B. Within 90 days of passing the examination. C. Within 45 days of passing the examination. D. Within 60 days of passing the examination. A countdown circle appears in the top right. Once it completes, the answer is revealed. You can pause at any time if you'd like longer to think. If you'd like additional practice covering more topics, see the description for our book. The correct answer is D. The correct answer is within 60 days of passing the examination, as Massachusetts regulation requires submission within that period to ensure timely processing of the application. Reason A is not correct. Submitting within 30 days is more restrictive than the statutory requirement. Reason B is not correct. A 90-day window exceeds the regulatory limit for submission. Reason C is not correct. A 45-day window is not prescribed by Massachusetts regulations. Question 2. To qualify for a Massachusetts non-resident producer license by reciprocity, an applicant must have maintained an active producer license in the home state for at least how many days immediately preceding the non-resident application? A. At least 30 days. B. At least 90 days. C. At least 60 days. D. At least 1 year. The correct answer is B. The correct answer is at least 90 days, as Massachusetts regulations mandate a minimum 3-month active licensing period in the home state prior to granting a reciprocal non-resident license. Reason A is not correct. 30 days is shorter than the required minimum period. Reason C is not correct. 60 days does not satisfy the 3-month requirement. Reason D is not correct. 1 year exceeds the regulatory minimum and is not required. Question 3. Under Massachusetts law, when a business entity registers as an insurance producer, its designated responsible licensed producer must A. Hold a Massachusetts resident producer license in at least 1 line of authority. B. Be an officer or partner of the business entity. C. Be a Massachusetts resident with at least 2 years of producer experience. D. Hold a Massachusetts producer license with authority in every line the business entity is applying to transact. The correct answer is D. The correct answer is that the designated responsible licensed producer must hold authority in every line of insurance the business entity will transact, ensuring proper oversight under Massachusetts regulations. Reason A is not correct. Licensing in only 1 line does not cover all lines the entity will transact. Reason B is not correct. Officers or partners are not automatically designated. The focus is on licensing authority. Reason C is not correct. Residency and experience requirements are not the criteria. Line authority coverage is required. Question 4. Samantha has been issued a temporary producer license in Massachusetts while awaiting her full resident producer license. She passes the licensing exam after 45 days and is granted her permanent license. Under Massachusetts regulations for temporary licenses, when does Samantha's temporary license terminate? A. at the end of the 180-day temporary period, regardless of permanent license issuance. B. 30 days after the permanent license is issued. C. Immediately upon issuance of the permanent license. D. When the initial application fee is fully processed. The correct answer is C. The correct answer is that the temporary license terminates immediately upon issuance of the permanent license, as state regulations stipulate that a temporary license remains in effect only until a permanent license is granted or the maximum period expires. Reason A is not correct. The temporary license does not remain active for the full 180 days if a permanent license is issued sooner. Reason B is not correct. There is no additional grace period after permanent license issuance. Termination is immediate. Reason D is not correct. Termination is not tied to fee processing but to the grant of the permanent license. Question 5. Under MGLC 175, Section 4, which of the following powers is expressly granted to the Massachusetts Insurance Commissioner? A. Prosecute individuals for insurance fraud criminally. B. Fix premium rates for personal auto insurance. C. Adopt regulations to enforce state insurance statutes. D. Provide legal defense for insurers in litigation. The correct answer is C. This option is correct because the Commissioner's statutory powers include promulgating regulations necessary to enforce Massachusetts insurance laws, whereas rate setting, criminal prosecution, and insurer defense are beyond that authority. Reason A is not correct. Criminal prosecution of fraud is handled by law enforcement and district attorneys, not by the Insurance Commissioner's office. Reason B is not correct. Fixing personal auto rates is not a power of the Commissioner. Rate filings are submitted by insurers and reviewed rather than set directly. Reason D is not correct. Providing legal defense for insurers is not a regulatory power. The Commissioner enforces laws rather than represent insurers. Question 6. Under Massachusetts law, the Insurance Commissioner has statutory authority to examine which of the following insurer documents? A. Attorney-client communications within the company. B. Personal tax returns of policyholders. C. Underwriting files and loss reserve records. D. Employment contracts of non-insurance personnel. The correct answer is C. This option is correct because the Commissioner can examine insurer books and records, including underwriting files and loss reserves, to ensure solvency and compliance, whereas the other documents are outside that scope. Reason A is not correct. Attorney-client communications are privileged and not subject to routine regulatory examination. Reason B is not correct. Policyholders' personal tax returns are not insurer records, subject to examination by the Commissioner. Reason D is not correct. Contracts of non-insurance personnel fall outside the insurer books and records required for regulatory review. Question 7. Which of the following is a requirement for an insurer to obtain and maintain a certificate of authority in Massachusetts? A. File monthly advertising activity reports to the Insurance Commission. B. Maintain a minimum capital and surplus as prescribed by the Commissioner. C. Submit annual marketing plans to the State Commerce Department. D. Maintain an AM Best Financial Strength rating of at least A. The correct answer is B. This option is correct because Massachusetts law mandates that insurers hold minimum capital and surplus levels set by the Commissioner to ensure financial integrity, whereas the other items are not statutory requirements for certificates of authority. Reason A is not correct. Monthly advertising reports are not required for maintaining a certificate of authority. Reason C is not correct. Annual marketing plans to the Commerce Department are not a statutory requirement. Reason D is not correct. Maintaining a specific rating from a private agency is voluntary, not required by Massachusetts law. Question 8. A Massachusetts admitted insurer's chief financial officer recently pleaded guilty to felony embezzlement under state law. The Division of Insurance reviewed the conviction and assessed its impact on the insurer's ability to operate. Which of the following constitutes a statutory ground for the commissioner to revoke the insurer's certificate of authority? A. Conviction of the chief financial officer for a felony involving financial dishonesty. B. Operating with risk-based capital below the required threshold. C. Failure to timely reimburse examination costs assessed by the commissioner. D. Repeatedly delaying payment of claims beyond the maximum time permitted by statute. The correct answer is A. Under Massachusetts law, conviction of an insurer's officer or director for a felony involving financial dishonesty is explicitly listed as a ground for revocation of the certificate of authority. Reason B is not correct. Operating with insufficient risk-based capital triggers a regulatory action plan and heightened supervision, but does not by itself authorize certificate revocation. Reason C is not correct. Failure to reimburse examination costs may result in administrative penalties or interest charges, but is not enumerated as a revocation ground. Reason D is not correct. Unfair or delayed claim settlement practices can lead to fines and corrective orders, but are not statutory grounds for revoking the certificate of authority. Question 9. Under the Fair Credit Reporting Act, if a property insurer takes adverse underwriting action based in whole or in part on information in a consumer report, what is the insurer required to furnish to the consumer? A. A copy of the consumer report and the name of the reporting agency. B. Written notice of adverse action with the agency's name, address, phone number, and a summary of consumer rights. C. Only a statement of the credit scoring factors used in the decision. D. Oral notice of the adverse action within 5 business days. The correct answer is B. The Fair Credit Reporting Act requires that after taking adverse action based on a consumer report, the insurer must provide a written notice identifying the reporting agency, its contact information, and a summary of the consumer's rights under the Act. Reason A is not correct. The law requires more than just a copy and agency name. It also mandates contact details and a summary of rights. Reason C is not correct. Identifying scoring factors alone does not satisfy the requirement for agency contact information and a rights summary. Reason D is not correct. Notification must be provided in writing, not orally, to comply with the Act's disclosure requirements. Question 10. Under the Fair Credit Reporting Act, what distinguishes an investigative consumer report from a standard consumer report in property insurance underwriting? A. It includes information obtained through personal interviews about the consumer's character, reputation, or lifestyle. B. It prohibits an insurer from considering any credit history or credit score in underwriting decisions. C. It contains only numerical credit scores and payment histories provided by credit bureaus. D. It can be obtained without a separate written disclosure and written consent from the consumer. The correct answer is A. An investigative consumer report differs by including information gathered through personal interviews regarding the consumer's character, reputation, or lifestyle, and requires separate disclosure and consent under the Act. Reason B is not correct. The report does not ban credit history, it adds interview information to credit data. Reason C is not correct. A standard consumer report contains credit scores and payment history, but lacks interview-based content. Reason D is not correct. Investigative reports cannot be obtained without a distinct written disclosure and consent. Question 11. In insurance terminology, how does pure risk fundamentally differ from speculative risk? A. Pure risk involves only the possibility of loss or no loss. Speculative risk involves potential for either a financial gain or a loss. B. Pure risk arises from deliberate profit-seeking activities. Speculative risk arises only from unintentional chance events. C. Pure risk is typically uninsurable. Speculative risk is generally insurable because it includes opportunities for gain. D. Pure risk entails outcomes of loss or no change. Speculative risk entails outcomes that include profit or loss possibilities. The correct answer is A. The correct answer distinguishes that pure risk offers only the possibility of loss or no loss, whereas speculative risk additionally allows for monetary gain. Reason B is not correct. This reverses the definitions by attributing deliberate profit seeking to pure risk rather than speculative risk. Reason C is not correct. This distractor incorrectly links insurability to the distinction instead of focusing on the possibility of gain. Reason D is not correct. This swaps the characteristic outcomes, implying pure risk includes profit potential, which is actually speculative risk. Question 12. In property insurance underwriting, which example best represents an exposure used to calculate a property insurance premium? A. The square footage of a warehouse storing goods. B. The historical annual loss frequency at the property. C. The total payroll of a manufacturing plant's employees. D. The fire department response time to the insured location. The correct answer is A. Square footage exemplifies an exposure unit in property insurance, as premiums are often calculated based on area measurements. Reason B is not correct. Loss frequency is a rating factor but not an exposure unit for premium determination. Reason C is not correct. Payroll is an exposure metric in workers' compensation underwriting, not property insurance. Reason D is not correct. Response time relates to risk assessment but does not serve as an exposure unit for premiums. Question 13. Which of the following scenarios best exemplifies a moral hazard? A. A roof with deteriorated shingles more prone to leaks. B. Occupational exposure to corrosive chemicals in a manufacturing plant. C. An insured neglects routine maintenance because coverage reduces concern about property condition. D. A policyholder intentionally understates the value of antiques to reduce premium. The correct answer is D. Moral hazard involves intentional misrepresentation or dishonesty by the insured to secure a benefit or reduce loss. Reason A is not correct. This describes a physical hazard related to property condition, not insured behavior. Reason B is not correct. This is a physical hazard involving tangible property conditions, not a moral consideration. Reason C is not correct. This illustrates a morale hazard, reflecting indifference or carelessness rather than intentional deceit. Question 14. After a severe storm damages the roof and windows of a retail store, the owner faces several expenses: debris removal, replacement of shattered windows, repair of the roof, and income lost while the store remains closed. Which of the following represents an indirect loss? A. Debris removal costs. B. Replacement costs for shattered windows. C. Income lost during store closure. D. Repair expenses for the damaged roof. The correct answer is C. The correct answer is income lost during store closure because indirect losses are consequential, non-physical financial impacts stemming from property damage rather than the direct cost to restore or replace property. Reason A is not correct. Debris removal costs are direct expenses incurred to restore damaged property, not consequential losses. Reason B is not correct. Replacing shattered windows is a direct repair cost, not a financial consequence of property damage. Reason D is not correct. Roof repair expenses are direct property restoration costs, not resulting financial impacts. Question 15. Which of the following is a unique characteristic of a mutual insurance company compared to a stock insurance company? A. Issues participating policies that distribute divisible surplus to policyholders as dividends. B. Raises capital by issuing equity shares purchasable by public investors. C. Operates under governance that includes shareholder election of a board of directors. D. Distributes earnings primarily to satisfy external stockholders' profit expectations. The correct answer is A. The correct answer is based on the fact that mutual insurers are owned by policyholders and issue participating policies that share any divisible surplus among those policyholders as dividends, whereas stock insurers raise capital through shareholders and distribute profits to them. Reason B is not correct. Mutual insurers do not issue equity shares to raise capital. That is a feature of stock insurers. Reason C is not correct. Mutual insurers' boards are elected by policyholders, not external shareholders. Reason D is not correct. Mutual insurers distribute surplus to their policyholders, not to outside stockholders. Question 16. Which of the following is a required organizational feature of a fraternal benefit society under U.S. insurance statutes? A. Establishment and maintenance of a lodge system governed by ritualistic work and codified bylaws. B. Authority to issue capital stock shares to raise funds for underwriting operations. C. Requirement to maintain contingency reserves in excess of risk-based capital thresholds. D. Permission to market insurance policies to any individual without membership criteria. The correct answer is A. The correct answer is that fraternal benefit societies must operate under a lodge system with ritualistic work and codified bylaws, a hallmark distinguishing them from other insurer types. Reason B is not correct. Fraternal societies cannot issue capital stock. They operate as nonprofit membership organizations. Reason C is not correct. While they must maintain reserves, they are not required to exceed general risk-based capital thresholds uniquely. Reason D is not correct. Fraternal societies may only insure those who meet membership prerequisites, not the general public. Question 17. A coalition of specialized consultants from several states is forming an insurance group under the Federal Liability Risk Retention Act. They want to provide coverage for risks faced exclusively by their members. Which statement accurately describes a restriction on the coverages they can write? A. They may underwrite both liability and property coverages for their members. B. They are required to file all rates and policy forms with each state regulator. C. They must offer coverage to non-members working in the same profession. D. They may underwrite only liability coverages for their members. The correct answer is D. Risk retention groups under the Federal Liability Risk Retention Act are authorized to underwrite liability risks only for their members and are prohibited from providing property or other lines of coverage. Reason A is not correct. This is incorrect because risk retention groups cannot underwrite property or other non-liability lines. Reason B is not correct. This is incorrect because risk retention groups are largely exempt from state rate and form filing requirements. Reason C is not correct. This is incorrect because risk retention groups may insure only their members, not non-members. Question 18. Which of the following best describes apparent authority in the context of an insurance producer? A. An insurer's written agreement specifying the producer's powers and limitations. B. The insurer's conduct leads a reasonable third party to believe the producer is authorized. C. Tasks reasonably necessary to fulfill authority explicitly granted by the insurer. D. Authority conferred by statute allowing a producer to bind coverage in urgent situations. The correct answer is B. Apparent authority arises when an insurer's actions or representations cause a third party reasonably to believe the producer has certain powers. Reason A is not correct. Describes express authority which is granted directly by contract rather than by insurer conduct. Reason C is not correct. Defines implied authority which covers tasks needed to carry out express authority. Reason D is not correct. refers to statutory binder power, not the doctrine of apparent authority. Question 19. A licensed producer is helping a first-time homeowner choose a homeowner's insurance policy. The producer can recommend an expanded replacement cost endorsement, which covers full rebuilding costs for a moderate premium increase, or a basic replacement cost endorsement that may result in an underpayment in a claim but generates higher commission. To fulfill the duty to act in the insured's best interest, the producer should A. Recommend the basic replacement cost endorsement to keep the insured's premium as low as possible. B. Recommend the expanded replacement cost endorsement to ensure the insured has adequate rebuilding coverage. C. Agree to waive the endorsement requirement at the insured's request without explaining underinsurance risks. D. Suggest adding flood coverage since it yields additional commission, even though flood risk is minimal for this property. The correct answer is B. The correct answer is to recommend the expanded replacement cost endorsement because it prioritizes the insured's need for full rebuilding protection over the producer's commission, fulfilling the duty to act in the client's best interest. Reason A is not correct. Recommending the basic endorsement sacrifices adequate coverage to lower premium, risking underinsurance and failing to prioritize the insured's needs. Reason C is not correct. Waiving the endorsement without explaining underinsurance risk denies the insured critical information and undermines the duty to act in their best interest. Reason D is not correct. Suggesting flood coverage for extra commission when flood risk is minimal imposes unnecessary costs and creates a conflict with the insured's best interest. Question 20. Which of the following is not an essential element required for the formation of a valid insurance contract? A. Competent parties. B. Legal purpose. C. Offer and acceptance. D. Utmost good faith. The correct answer is D. The correct answer is utmost good faith, because while it is a fundamental principle of insurance, it is not listed among the core elements, offer and acceptance, consideration, competent parties, legal purpose, required to form a valid contract. Reason A is not correct. Competent parties refers to the legal capacity of each party to enter into a contract and is required for validity. Reason B is not correct. Legal purpose ensures the contract's objective is lawful and is a necessary element. Reason C is not correct. Offer and acceptance reflect mutual assent and are essential for contract formation. Enjoyed this practice test? Tap like, hit subscribe, and share it with a classmate. Got a question we should tweak? Comment below, we read them all. Find full practice exam books in the description or at ExamPrep.School.